They called her the cleaning lady to her face. On her first day, in front of the entire surgical team. Dr. Marcus Webb said it without looking up from his clipboard. Pre-op briefing, OR3, St. Dunstan's Medical Center, Toronto. 14 people in that room, nurses, residents, an anesthesiologist adjusting lines, a scrub tech laying out instruments, and not one of them said a word. The woman he'd said it to was Adeze Okonkwo, 51 years old, thin-framed glasses, hospital-issued scrubs freshly pressed. She'd arrived 12 minutes early, introduced herself to the charge nurse at the desk, signed in on the visitor log under her actual title, visiting clinical consultant. Cardiac surgery. Marcus Webb hadn't read the visitor log. He'd seen a black woman in her 50s standing quietly near the door, holding a worn leather portfolio instead of a tablet, and made a decision about who she was before she'd opened her mouth. "Housekeeping's done in here," he said, still not looking up. "You can do the recovery bay next." Ada didn't correct him. Not right away. She set her portfolio on the counter beside the door and watched him work. She stood the way a person stands when they are deciding something, not angry yet, just measuring. Dr. Webb. Her voice was even. "I'm Ada Okonkwo. I'm here for the Morrison consult." Marcus looked up then. A slow blink. He looked at her scrubs, her glasses, her portfolio. He looked at the name badge she'd been given at the front desk, the temporary one, the beige kind, the kind they hand out to people they haven't fully processed yet. "The Morrison consult," he repeated. "That's right." He turned to his resident, a young man named Tyler Ashford, 29 years old, 3 months into his first surgical rotation, still making decisions based on who smiled at him and who didn't. "Tyler," Marcus said, "can you find out who sent us a consult request without clearing it through my office first?" He said it like Ada wasn't standing right there, like she was furniture, like she was, in fact, the woman who cleaned the floors. Tyler glanced at Ada. His face did something complicated, the look of a person who knows something is wrong and is already calculating the cost of saying so. He looked back at his clipboard. "I'll look into it," he said. Ada picked up her portfolio. She didn't leave. She didn't raise her voice. She found a chair along the far wall, the kind that gets pushed there for students and observers, sat down, crossed her legs, and opened her portfolio to a set of notes she'd already prepared on the Morrison case. Cardiac resynchronization therapy, delayed referral, complex device interaction. She'd reviewed the file the night before on her laptop at her kitchen table in Ottawa, eating rice and stew her daughter had left in the fridge, making margin notes in pencil the way she'd done since her first year of residency 30 years ago. Nobody in OR3 knew those notes existed. Nobody asked. At 8:15, the pre-op briefing ended. The team filed out. Marcus Webb passed her without looking at her. Tyler Ashford passed her and looked at his shoes. Ada sat for a moment in the empty room. Then she closed her portfolio, stood, and went to find the nursing station for cardiac ICU. The charge nurse there was a woman named Denise Fournier, 55, originally from Sudbury, 22 years at St. Dunstan's. She had the manner of someone who had seen everything this building could produce and had stopped being surprised by most of it. Ada introduced herself. Denise looked at the temporary badge, at the portfolio, at Ada's face, and something shifted. Not recognition exactly, more like the particular alertness of someone who has learned, over 22 years, to pay attention to the things that don't quite fit. "You're the consult for Morrison," Denise said. "Not a question." "I am. He's in Bay 4. A pause. "I'll take you." She did. She also, without being asked, handed Ada a proper access lanyard from the staff drawer, the permanent-looking kind, the kind with a magnetic stripe. Ada noticed but didn't comment. The patient, Gerald Morrison, was 67, a retired civil engineer from Mississauga. He'd been in cardiac ICU for 9 days. Initial referral for device adjustment, complications compounding. He'd been through 2 consultations with the St. Dunstan's team. Neither had resolved the device interaction causing his irregular output. Ada pulled a stool to his bedside. "Mr. Morrison," she said. "My name is Ada Okonkwo. I'm a cardiac electrophysiologist. I've been asked to look at your case. Can you tell me, in your own words, what's been going on?" He was tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from one bad night, but from 9 days of being woken every 2 hours. of having your chest explained to you in language designed to inform without alarming, of not knowing whether you were getting better or quietly worse, he told her. She listened the way a person listens when they are not thinking about their next question. She wrote in her portfolio. She asked about the timeline of the original implant, his medication history, a specific symptom he'd mentioned almost parenthetically, a sensation he'd described as a skipping feeling, like a record catching. She asked him to describe it again. He did. Her pen slowed. She asked one more question. He answered. She looked at her notes, turned back 3 pages, and was quiet for a moment. "Okay," she said. "Thank you, Mr. Morrison. I'm going to speak with the team." She meant it as information. He heard it as the first sentence in 9 days that had sounded like someone actually had a plan. Out in the hallway, she found a quiet spot near the window at the end of the bay. The one that looked out over the parking structure, the one where the light came in gray and flat at this hour, and stood there for a few minutes, working through the logic of what she suspected. Then she went looking for Marcus Webb. She found him in the surgical scheduling room, reviewing tomorrow's board with 2 of his residents. She knocked on the open door. He looked at her with the expression of a man who has mentally filed someone in a category and is mildly annoyed to see them still present. "Dr. Webb, I've seen Mr. Morrison. I'd like to discuss a possible lead interaction causing sensing failure. I think the device settings haven't accounted for the medication adjustment made on day 4, and it's creating a feedback." "We've reviewed Morrison's device settings twice," Marcus said. He didn't turn fully toward her. "The team has it in hand. I don't think the day 4 medication change was flagged in the device notes," Ada said. "The timing of his symptoms aligns with the timing has been reviewed." A pause. "Dr. Webb, I'd like 5 minutes to show you the—" "I'm sorry." He set down his pen with the careful deliberateness of a man performing patience. "What exactly is your appointment here? Who arranged this consult?" Ada was quiet for one beat. "The arrangement was made through the chief of cardiology." Marcus picked his pen back up. "I'll follow up with Dr. Renner directly. Until then," he gestured toward the door-to-door, "when the conversation is over and has been for some time, we'll take it from here." Ada looked at him. For a moment she said, "Of course." She went back to the hallway. She found the same chair she'd sat in outside or 3. She sat down. She opened her portfolio to a blank page and wrote the date at the top, and below it, in her precise penciled handwriting, she began to document every exchange, every time, every location and witness present. She'd started this habit in 1998, her second year as a junior attending at a hospital in London, Ontario. She had kept the practice for 26 years. She had never yet needed the notes for anything formal. She had also never thrown any of them away. At 11:30, Tyler Ashford found her. He was clearly not supposed to be there. He had the look of someone who had taken a detour he'd told himself was about getting a coffee and knew, as he was doing it, that was not actually what it was about. He stopped a few feet away. "Dr. Okonkwo." She looked up. He pressed his hands together. "I looked up your CV this morning. When Dr. Webb sent me to find out about the consult request." She waited. "You were chief of cardiac electrophysiology at the University of Ottawa Heart Institute," he said, "for 11 years. A pause. "You've published." He stopped himself, looked at the floor. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry about this morning." It wasn't right. Ada looked at him for a long moment, 29 years old, 3 months into his rotation, making a small choice in a hallway that nobody had asked him to make. "Thank you, Tyler," she said, and she meant it. "Go back to your work." He nodded. He started to leave, then turned back. "The day 4 medication change," he said quietly. "You might be right about that. The notes from that shift, I don't think it got flagged in the device chart." Then he left. Ada sat for a moment. Then she stood, walked to the nursing station, and asked Denise Fournier if she could use a quiet room to make a phone call. Denise showed her to a small family consultation room, empty at this hour, with 2 chairs and a box of tissues on the table and a window looking out at the same parking structure. Ada sat down. She opened her phone to a contact labeled simply James R. She looked at it for a moment. The number she'd had for 24 years, since they'd been co-fellows together at a hospital in Montreal, since James Renner had laughed at her jokes in the break room at 2 in the morning and told her she was going to be remarkable and turned out to be right. She put the phone back in her bag. Not yet. She had come here to do a job. She was going to do it. She went back to Gerald Morrison's bedside. She asked him 2 more questions, ones she hadn't thought to ask the first time, about the rhythm of his discomfort relative to his meal schedule and his sleep position. He answered. She wrote. She returned to the hallway and stood at the window and completed the picture she'd been building since she'd first read his file the night before at her kitchen table. She was right. She was certain she was right. The question was how to make that matter in a building where the person who needed to hear it had already decided not to listen. At 1:45 in the afternoon, Marcus Webb held a team check-in in the ICU conference room. 7 people around the table. Residents, nurses, the anesthesiologist from that morning. Ada had not been told about it. She found out when she saw the group moving down the hall. She stood up. She walked to the conference room door, steady, without hurrying. "Excuse me." She looked at Marcus. "I'd like 5 minutes." The room went still. 7 people in chairs, looking at the table, at the window, at their tablets. Marcus looked at her. "Dr. Okonkwo, this is an internal team briefing. I understand that. I'm asking for 5 minutes." He sighed. The sigh of a man who has learned that sometimes it is more efficient to let people exhaust themselves than to stop them directly. "Go ahead." She walked to the whiteboard. She wrote 4 lines. Dates, values, a medication name, a device threshold, and explained, clearly and without editorializing, why she believed Gerald Morrison's sensing failure was a direct consequence of a missed interaction between his anti-arrhythmic adjustment on day 4 and his pacing parameters, and what she would recommend to correct it. She spoke for 4 minutes and 40 seconds. When she stopped, nobody said anything for a moment. Then Denise Fournier, who had come in at the back of the room because she'd seen Ada heading for the door and had made a quiet decision, said, "That's consistent with what he reported to me on day 6. The skipping sensation." He mentioned it twice. A nurse named Patricia Chu, who had been on Morrison's Bay for 3 days and had written the symptom note that got filed and not flagged, said, "I charted that. I didn't realize." She stopped. "I should have pushed harder on that." Marcus Webb sat with his hands flat on the table. His face was unreadable. He looked at Ada's 4 lines on the whiteboard. "Send me your notes," he said at last. She nodded. "I will." She left the room. She went back to the consultation room with the tissues and the parking structure window and sat down with her portfolio open in her lap. She wrote the time, the attendees, what had been said. Her phone buzzed. A text from her daughter, Maya. "How's Toronto? Did you eat lunch?" She typed back. "Working, yes, a beat. Love you." She looked at the phone for a moment after she sent it. Then she put it face down on the table and sat with the quiet of the room and the hum of the ventilation system and the knowledge that what happened next was not in her hands. She was used to this. She had been used to this for 26 years. It didn't make it easier. It just made it familiar. What happened next was this. At 4:20 in the afternoon, a black car pulled into the parking structure outside the window Ada had been looking at all day. A man got out. Late 60s, coat open despite the October cold, moving the way people move when they've been sitting on an airplane and are glad to be upright. Dr. James Renner, chief of cardiology, St. Dunstan's Medical Center. He'd been at a conference in Vancouver for 4 days. He hadn't sent an email announcing his return. He hadn't needed to. He came through the front entrance, nodded at the receptionist, declined the offer to call ahead to his office, took the elevator to the 4th floor. He was looking for Ada. He found Denise Fournier first, who told him, with a particular quality of evenness in her voice, that Dr. Okonkwo was in the family consultation room at the end of the bay. She said it, the way a person says something when there is more to say, but they are going to let the situation speak for itself. James thanked her and walked down the hall. He knocked on the consultation room door. Ada looked up. He saw the portfolio in her lap, the notes on the table, the 4 separate entries she'd written since morning. He saw the temporary badge she was still wearing, the beige one, not exchanged even after Denise had given her the proper lanyard, because it hadn't occurred to her to worry about badges today. He saw something in her face that he recognized from the time he'd known her, which was the expression she wore when she was carrying more than she was saying. "Ada," he said. "James." She closed the portfolio. "I didn't call you. I know." He sat down across from her. "Denise Fournier did." Ada looked at the window, then back at him. Something shifted behind her eyes. Not surprise, more like the particular feeling of a person who has been holding a very specific posture for a very long time and has just been told they can put it down. "How is Morrison?" he asked. "I think he's going to be fine," she said. "If the recommendation gets acted on, it will." She nodded. "Tell me what happened today," James said. She did, not with emotion. With facts, the same way she'd documented it, in order, with times and names. The pre-op room, the housekeeping comment. Tyler being sent to investigate her credentials, the dismissal outside the scheduling room, the team meeting she hadn't been told about. James listened without interrupting. When she finished, he sat quietly for a moment. He looked at the table. "Ada," he said at last, "I'm sorry. I should have done more to prepare the team for your arrival. You couldn't have known. I could have made a phone call." He said it plainly, not performing guilt, stating a fact about a failure he was going to own. "I've known Marcus Webb for 12 years. I knew the temperature in there. I should have called ahead." Ada was quiet. "That's one piece," he said. "There are others." He stood up. "Come with me." She picked up her portfolio and followed him out. What happened in the next 30 minutes was calm, and it was not calm at all. James Renner walked the 4th floor. He stopped at the nursing station and asked, in his normal voice, for a brief update on Morrison. He stopped at the scheduling room where Marcus Webb was still at the board. He knocked, went in, and asked Ada to stay at the door. He spoke to Marcus Webb for 7 minutes. Ada could not hear all of it. She heard enough. She heard Marcus say, "I didn't realize," and she heard James say, "That's the problem," and she heard the particular silence that falls in a room when a person understands that the conversation they are in has permanent consequences. When James came out, he didn't look at her with triumph. He looked at her the way a person looks when something that should have been prevented wasn't, and now they are doing the next necessary thing. He walked with her to the ICU conference room. He asked the charge nurse to assemble the available team members. 6 people gathered. Tyler, Patricia, 3 others, Denise. James spoke simply. He said that Dr. Okonkwo was a guest of this institution and a colleague of significant standing. He said that the way she had been received this morning was not consistent with the values of this department. He said that going forward, her recommendation on Morrison would be implemented, and that he would be reviewing how consulting physicians were introduced and supported in this unit. He said it without theater, no raised voice, no public humiliation of anyone, just clarity, the kind that leaves no interpretive room. Then he said, "Dr. Okonkwo, is there anything you'd like to say?" She had not expected that. She looked around the room, at Tyler, who was looking at her with something that was very close to relief, at Patricia, who was looking at her hands, at Denise, who was looking straight ahead with the stillness of a person who has been waiting a long time for a particular moment and is now watching it happen. "Thank you for hearing me today," Ada said. "I mean that, for those of you who did." She looked at Tyler when she said it. He looked back. The meeting ended. People filed out. James walked her back to the consultation room to collect her bag. In the doorway, he stopped. "He's going to be put on a formal performance review," James said. "Webb. There have been other complaints. This gives the department head what she needed to act." Ada nodded. "Tyler Ashford," James said. "He called my office this afternoon. Before I landed, she looked at him. He left a voicemail," James said. "Laid it all out. Took about 3 minutes." A pause. "He's a good resident, he is," Ada said. She picked up her bag. She looked around the small room, the 2 chairs, the tissue box, the window she'd been staring at all day. She thought about her kitchen table in Ottawa, the rice and stew in the fridge, the file she'd read the night before, pencil in hand, making notes because she had not stopped being careful and thorough and present in 26 years, regardless of what rooms had tried to convince her she belonged in. "James," she said. "Yeah, tell the department head to also look at the anonymous reporting process. I asked a nurse today if there was a formal channel." She laughed. He wrote it in his phone. Done. She left. She took the elevator down to the main lobby, returned the temporary badge to the desk, and walked out through the front entrance into the October afternoon. The cold came at her cleanly, the particular Toronto cold that carries the smell of lake water and diesel and city. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment. Just stood there, letting her shoulders drop about a half-inch, the way they do when a posture you've been holding all day finally gets to stop. She thought about Gerald Morrison in Bay 4, the skipping feeling, like a record catching. 9 days in a hospital bed, tired in a way that doesn't come from one bad night. The way he'd looked at her when she said, "I'm going to speak with the team," like something in him had unclenched, just slightly. She took out her phone and called her daughter. Maya answered on the second ring. "Mum, how was it?" "Long," Ada said. "Did you eat?" "Eventually." "Was it good? The case?" Ada looked up at the building behind her, at the fourth-floor windows, behind which a man named Gerald Morrison was hopefully, by tomorrow, going to feel something other than that skipping feeling. "It will be," she said. She started walking toward the hotel. 3 blocks east, the lake was out there somewhere behind the buildings, invisible from here, but present. She could feel it the way you can sometimes feel large bodies of water, the particular weight of that much cold stillness just beyond what you can see. Her phone buzzed again, a text from a number she didn't immediately recognize, a 416 area code. "Dr. Okonkwo, it's Tyler Ashford. I hope it's okay that Denise gave me your number. I just wanted to say thank you. I don't think I did enough today, but I'm going to do better. I hope you come back." She stopped walking. "Read it twice." She wrote back, "You did something. That's where better begins." She put the phone in her pocket and kept walking. That story is fiction, but everything Ada walked into that morning, the assumption made before she opened her mouth, the credential she had to prove in a room that had already decided, the team meeting nobody thought to include her in, Denise slipping her the proper lanyard without being asked, none of that is fiction. Not really. Not if you've ever been the person in the temporary badge. According to the Canadian Human Rights Commission, race-based discrimination remains one of the most frequently reported grounds of complaint in Canadian workplaces, and those are only the complaints filed by people who believed, despite everything, that filing would matter. For every Ada who stayed and worked the case and wrote it all down, there are people who left, who walked out the front door and didn't come back, and never said the exact reason why, because the exact reason is sometimes too exhausting to explain to people who weren't in the room. Marcus Webb didn't lose his career because Ada was black. He lost it because he looked at a 51-year-old woman with 26 years of expertise and a penciled portfolio full of the right answer and chose not to see any of it. And a floor full of people watched him do it for an entire day before one resident made a 3-minute phone call. So here's what I want to ask you. Not about Ada, about you. When you are in that room, and most of us have been on one side or the other, what do you do with the 3 minutes? Because Tyler Ashford didn't need to be chief of cardiology to make that call. He needed to decide that what he'd seen mattered more than what staying quiet would cost him. That's it. That's the whole thing. Tell me in the comments what you would have done. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe. Because next week, we're telling another story that the world doesn't talk about nearly enough. You don't have to be the chief to change the room. You just have to decide that the room needs changing.